Finally, the long-awaited son is born at age 100 for Abraham. Can you imagine the joy, the awe, the wonder of that long-awaited son? 30 years you wait for that child, and then he shows up. This is my boy. And it was this and this boy only through whom that promise would come. And in Genesis 17, he had reiterated the promise, and he said that this time your descendants will be like the sand of the seashore. That's a lot bigger promise. And we have to understand, all of Abraham's spiritual hopes were in this boy. This is the boy through whom the line of the Messiah will come. If anything happens to Isaac, there's no Messiah. If there's no Messiah, Abraham is dead in his sin. If Abraham is dead in his sin, he goes to hell for eternity. There's a lot riding on this. Isaac, I put it this way, is a big deal in the promises of God. And suddenly, out of seeming nowhere, this hope is tested. Oh, what a nice little word. Shattered. Look at the text, verse 1. God comes to Abraham and he says, Abraham, and Abraham says, oh, here am I. Don't you love that? So innocent, so beautiful, so naive, so responsive. He's totally unaware of what God is about to ask of him. Oh, did you hear that word? That's a lie. God was not asking. It's an imperative verb. God, I know, it makes me cry too. God is commanding here. This is the mother of all tests. Take your son. We're going to walk through this slowly. I want you to feel what's going on. I want you in the passage. Take your son. Wait a minute. You don't mess with my son. Many of you know of Major Ian Thomas, who traveled the world for decades sharing Christ as life. He always went with a personal assistant. Well, his personal assistant years ago was leaving him, and so he was here visiting, and he met Ben, who was 14 at the time. After spending a couple days with us, he came to me and he said, Frank, give me your boy. I'll take him as a boy, and I'll give him back to you as a man. I said, no, you stay away from my son. I'm raising my son, not you. Take your son. And then look what he does. He heaps on the superlatives. Your son, your only son, Isaac, the one that you love. I mean, is God being mean here? No. He's helping Abram out. How many of you know that when you go through a difficult time, you want somebody to understand what you're going through? You want somebody to hear you. You can go through it if you know there's somebody that gets it. That's what God is doing here. He's got his arm around Abraham. He's saying, I get it, son. I get it. This is your boy. This is the only boy, the only begotten boy, the beloved boy. How come God gets it? Because a few centuries later, what? God's going to give his own boy. I'm in your court, Abraham. I know what I'm calling you to, son. I really, really do. I gave him to you. Now you give him back to me. One writer says this was a test of necessity. He has the conviction that Abraham had grown too fond of Isaac, that Isaac had taken the place of God in Abraham's heart. And that could cause great harm to Abraham's walk of faith because the place reserved for God has been squeezed out by another. We don't know if that's true, but I gotta wonder. You wait for a boy that long and that boy finally shows up, he's going to be precious in your heart. Watchman Nee even commented along the same line. He said, Isaac represents the many gifts of God's grace. Listen closely, please, my friends, because this is all of us. Isaac represents the many gifts of God's grace. Before God gives them to us, our hands were empty. Afterwards, they are full. then sometimes God will reach out his hand to take ours in fellowship. He needs an empty hand to put into his. But when we received his gifts and are nursing them, our hands are full. And when God puts out his hand, we have no empty hand for him to put his hand into. When that happens, we need to let go of the gift in order to take hold of God himself. And then he adds these very sobering words. Isaac can be done without. God cannot.